So it is June 5th, 2019. I'm finally getting around to installing the distributor I bought a couple months ago, maybe even longer. Putting it in a 74 Corvette, which originally came with a point style distributor, but I found a nice deal at Summit Racing on an HEI distributor. So I am going to convert it. One thing they didn't give me is they didn't give me a plug to go in for this is the power source and this is the tach. So I found some wires that have connectors on them. Hopefully they will fit. The original wiring on a HEI distributor, which I have in my 76 Corvette, I think had a brown wire for the tach, so I'm going to see if that one fits there. And it appears it does. Normally the power wire is pink. I don't happen to have a pink wire with a connector already on it, so I'm going to use a black one. The one in the car is pink, I believe. So we're going to try that. We'll splice into there to put it on. The reason I'm replacing it is because I have a cable-driven tach in the car, and the existing one keeps stripping out the gears inside here. So bought the whole new distributor. That should fix the problem. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get the firing order written down. You can look it up in the manual, but you still need to know which wire goes to which terminal. And this should be the number 1. Hopefully I'm going to look for the timing mark and see if we're on number 1. And hopefully it would be on the compression stroke as opposed to the exhaust stroke, so that we can put the rotor at the same position when we install the new distributor. The HEI distributor has a built-in coil. So this coil is no longer going to be here, and because the coil is inside the distributor, we'll no longer need the high voltage wire from the coil to the distributor. The other thing this car has, and I better make sure it's in the view of the other thing this car has is it has a separate resistor. Normally the Corvettes with point style ignitions have a resistor wire that goes to the coil. Keeps the points from burning once it's started. What they also have is a wire that comes from the starter solenoid up to the coil to give it 12 volts while you're starting, and then once you let go of the starter, the ignition key, it stops the voltage from coming from the solenoid to the coil. Okay, I had to go under the car because it's easier with a lift. But what you're looking at here is the harmonic balancer, and that's where the timing marks are. And I'll zoom in on that just a little bit. And I missed it. Okay, so you can see the 0, you can see the 10. Those are before top dead center, because that's what the timing is set for. So many degrees before top dead center. So what I want to do is I want to have the distributor set kind of at number 1, just because, you know, if I was doing it from scratch on a build of an engine, that's what I would do. I would have it on the compression stroke number 1. The way I would do that if I just built the engine would be I'd turn the engine over and I'd watch the valves with the valve cover off. Okay. I don't want to have to take the valve cover off just to replace a distributor. So what I will do is I will crank the engine over till I get it somewhere near 0 degrees, which would be exact top dead center. And then I'll take the distributor cap off and I'll make sure it's pointing to where the number 1 spark plug wire is pointing. So that's what we're going to do next. Well, next we're going to get the firing order written down so that we can put it back the way, put the spark plug wires back the way they were. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people who replaced the spark plug wires and they think they got them right and they're out of sequence, and you get backfiring and all kinds of nasty stuff if that happens. So that is very important, to make sure that you get the firing order correct. You get the spark plugs in connected on the distributor in the proper order, while it's at the position in the 4 cycles where it needs to fire. In other words, on the top of the compression stroke. That's when the spark plug needs to fire. So very important. Okay, firing order. Chevy cylinders are numbered 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 8. So I'm going to take the wire from number 1 and find out where on the distributor it goes. So number 1 is always your first cylinder to fire when you're talking about firing order. Then what I'm going to do is go clockwise on the distributor, and I'm going to trace the next wire, which is this one, and see where it goes to. And it goes to number 8. The third wire goes to the number 4 cylinder, the second one on this side. Next wire, and I'm going clockwise on the distributor, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. So the next wire goes to number 3. After that, we're back over on the other side. And they go from side to side so that the engine doesn't rock like crazy from firing them all in order. So the next one, follow the wire. It goes to the number 6 cylinder, which is the third one in on this side. Remember, this is 2, 4, 6. And we're back over on the other side. And that goes to number 5. Now the reason I'm doing this as opposed to just looking at the manual is that you can have a different cam that puts the firing order in a different place. You can also have a distributor, and this could get confusing because then you have to really know the firing order, but they make them sequential so that all the ones on this side are in order, and then inside the cap they're wired so that it comes out in this firing order. So next one is number 7. And the final one better be 2 because that's the only number that I haven't used yet. So that should be the front cylinder on this side of the engine. So follow that down, and it is indeed number 2. So now when I go to put the wires back on, I will just take them and trace them from the cylinder to the proper terminal on the new distributor. Okay, next thing we're going to do, I'm going to shut this off for a bit because I have to go get a screwdriver. We're going to take the distributor cap off. Removing the distributor cap is pretty easy. Hopefully you can see it on here. There's a screw here. It's actually just a hook that goes onto the bottom of the distributor, and you just turn it like a half a turn and it releases it. I will show you that when I get the cap off. But right now we're just going to do the other side. There's only 2 of them. There you have it. So these are the tabs that just you push down and turn, and they just lock under the base of the distributor. Chevys have a nice thing on the point style distributors. This little window here lifts up and you can get a Allen wrench in there to adjust your points. If you have a dwell meter, makes them very accurate, much more accurate than putting them on with a feeler gauge. But there is the distributor cap, the old one. Put that aside, and we're going to take a look here at the rotor. The rotor is pointing that way. This is the end of the rotor. Hopefully you can see that. That's your you're looking at, because this terminal here hits the center post in the distributor cap, which is for the wire from the coil that I just took off, and then it distributes the power to each cylinder as this makes contact inside the distributor with each of these terminals as it rotates. Now the distributor gear is set up so that it rotates once for every 2 revolutions of the engine. That's because on a 4-cycle engine, you have to be on, at first it takes gas in and air in, then it compresses it, fires the spark which powers it down, and then on the 4th stroke it comes up and it puts out exhaust. Well, you don't need a spark whenever you're putting out the exhaust, so that's why the distributor only turns once for every 2 revolutions of the engine. So as I said before, I want to have the engine at number 1 on the compression stroke, which, since the rotation of the distributor is clockwise, we should be coming up to it. I just need to get the engine turned over to where I can see the timing marks on there. So I'm just going to tap the starter. It will not start since I don't have any spark plug wires connected or anything. There's nothing that can happen, so I'm just going to tap the starter and try to rotate that just one little bit.
Light your phone.
That looks like that might be about it. I'm going to take a look down here at the timing marks, and then I'll show you on the camera if I can make it visible down there. Okay, now the tab that you see in there, the silver thing, that's the timing marks that are on the engine block. They're attached to the engine block so that you can set the timing. I'm trying to get this light down in here because behind that, there you can just see the marks right behind that. Those are the timing marks on the harmonic damper. So we are at a firing position for number 1, as demonstrated by the position of the rotor in the distributor, and our timing marks are showing near the top dead center, which means that we are, if the engine was running, number 1 cylinder would be set to fire. Now remember I said the distributor only rotates once for every 2 revolutions of the engine. If it were not ready to fire, in other words, we were on the exhaust stroke for number 1, what would happen is this rotor would be pointing somewhere over here, which is, I believe, number 6, which is, let me double check that. Yes, it's number 6, which is 4 positions away from number 1. So that's 1 revolution of the engine. Sorry for a shaky camera. But there you have it. So we know that when we drop the new distributor in, we're going to point the rotor to that number 1 position, at number 1 spark plug wire. And by the way, we could set it anywhere on that, and as long as the rotor was pointing in the right spot and you attach number 1 to where it was pointing and then followed the firing sequence, it would work, but it would probably confuse the next person to work on it. Okay, now two things need to be disconnected before we're ready to pull the distributor. One is the vacuum advance hose. And that is right down here. Back that off a little bit. A twist and a pull, and that vacuum hose is disconnected. Now we're going to want to leave that disconnected whenever we go ahead and put in the other distributor, because we're going to need to time it, and you want the vacuum advance disconnected to time it. The other thing, because this is a tactile drive distributor, that you need to disconnect is the actual tack cable. And I cheated. I checked to make sure this was loose before I videoed it, but it was just finger tight. So that cable is loose. I'm going to go get my distributor wrench, and on Chevys they take a 9/16, and then we're going to loosen the distributor and pull it out. Okay, while I was thinking of it, I went and I got the perfect thing to plug that vacuum line, because you have to plug it, otherwise the engine won't run very well whenever you're trying to do the timing. But a golf tee is the perfect tool to plug this line. And just insert it in there. You're good to go. Now, I'm going to try to zoom in on the, let me get my flashlight. I'm going to try to zoom in on the nut that we're going to take out to remove the distributor. And that's all that holds it in. Is that little nut. Okay, you can't really see the nut very well, but it's, you can see the edge of the bracket there. And I'm going to back it off a little bit so that you see better while I'm trying to loosen it. But the distributor wrench looks like this, and it connects to a ratchet, and that allows you to reach under there and loosen that bolt. Hopefully I'm not getting in the way too much. Okay, we're on the bolt. I might have that set to tighten. I do. That's not going to work. This bolt is going to have to come all the way out, so before you put your wrench away, you need to, probably should have taken the air cleaner off, that had more clearance. Sometimes it's a lot easier to take an extra part off than it is to fight with it. It's not good when you drop your ratchet down the fender well. But as you can see, this wrench has enough of a bend in it that fits underneath, and you can get a good swing to loosen it. This bolt has to come all the way out because it holds a clamp down, and without taking the bolt all the way out, you can't get the clamp past the distributor shaft. So if you're just timing the car, you can loosen it so that you can rotate the distributor. But if you're changing the distributor or taking it out for any reason, then you need to take that all the way out. Why does it always seem that the harder the bolt is to get to, the more difficult it is to turn it by hand? Okay, as you can see that I can turn the distributor now. That means that they get a better swing at it now. There, it's finally coming easy. There's a bolt. Oh, it's a nut on a stud. A nut, a washer. And there's the hold down clamp. When you screw this down, this just puts pressure on these two tabs which sit on the flange that's on the distributor, and that's what holds it tight. The next thing is to actually pull the distributor. And that should be very simple. Now you want to watch the rotor here as we pull it, because of the gear on it, the rotor is going to turn as we pull it out, and I think it is going to turn back that way, which means that when we're trying to reset the new distributor, we've got to start with the rotor a little bit before where it is. See how it's turning? It needs to be set right pretty much directly towards the front of the car. There you have it. Those gears are what cause you to have to set the rotor so that it can spin as you drop it in. Notice in the bottom of the distributor there is a I don't know what to call it. But it's a cross shaft in the inside of there. If I can get some light on it. That shaft fits into the top shaft of the oil pump. So you have to make sure that the distributor meshes with that as well as the gears. So there were some remains of a gasket from the old distributor on the top of the manifold where the distributor goes in. Scraping that off now. The blue shop towel that you see there is in there to prevent anything from going inside the engine. So I'm getting ready to take the old coil off since I don't need it. The coil is built into the distributor cap on the HEI ignitions. So I already loosened this bolt on the back side here so that I can take it off easier. And there's the coil. Now, the coil is fed approximately 6 or 7 volts from the resistor, and then it went to the distributor to fire the cylinder. So this is no longer needed. Now what we do have to figure out is there's 3 wires connected to this input of the resistor. And I have no idea what they're for because this car has had a lot of work done on it. So let me get a little wrench to take those wires off. Actually, the only one I need to take off is this one here. Too big a wrench. As I said before, you typically aren't going to find a separate resistor on this car because it was not made that way. So again, it looks like it's metric. And that doesn't fit. it's 9mm, which I don't have a 9mm wrench, and the socket doesn't fit very well, so unfortunately it fit well enough to take it off. And I can get the coil out of the way. While I'm fiddling with this resistor, the symptom that a car will have whenever the resistor or the resistor wire goes bad is when you turn the ignition, it will start. But as soon as you let go of the ignition key and return it from the start position, the engine dies. That's caused because the resistor or your resistor wire opened up, and okay, we have a couple of wires coming off of here. One comes from the wiring harness. This would appear to be your hot wire, although I guess it could be this one. But since they're both there, one of them, there's three. One goes to the electric choke. So we know that that has to be connected. And then the other two, one's an input power and one's output. So I'm thinking that this one, this is the electric choke right here. No, we need that one. This one, this last one, appears to be coming from this insulated cable or wire. It's typically the way the wire from the starter to the it should go to the power side of the coil, not the ignition side, not the distributor side. So maybe that was wired wrong in this car, because it was going through the resistor. Into this harness here. See if I can follow that back. If I can't follow it back, I'll put a voltmeter on it and see if it goes hot when I turn the ignition key. Next thing I'm going to do is get a wrench and just take that resistor completely off. But I'm going to shut down the camera for that. So I've identified the hot wire for the ignition. When I have the key on, connected to this red wire that I suspected, it's got power. Okay, so that's with power on, key on. I'm gonna be careful not to short this out while I go here. I need a better ground there. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to put that wire where it can't ground out, and I'm going to connect it to the wire that goes into the what I figured was the one that comes from the solenoid to give it 12 volts when you're starting. So when I crank the starter now, that light should come on, and it does. So I have identified those wires. I don't need to connect the one from the solenoid to the new distributor, because it's going to have 12 volts either way with just the first red wire. So it was wired wrong. That wire should have gone to the power side of the plus side of the coil. It didn't seem to affect its starting, but nonetheless it was wired wrong. So I think we're almost ready to drop the distributor in. Okay, the wiring under there is pretty much a mess. Wires are way too long for what's needed. I just want to neaten it up a little bit, so I'm going to put in some quick connectors so that I can quickly plug things together and unplug them. The one point I want to make is I always use this kind on anything that's going to be hot if I unplug it. In other words, I will put this on the distributor side because the power comes from the source to the distributor. So if I unplug this and this touches something, there won't be any current in it, so it won't short anything out. This, although it could short out, it'd be way more difficult because this is insulated around the outside and this isn't. So I'm going to go cut those wires, crimp some of these on, and then we'll be ready to put the distributor in. This is one of the wires that is way too long. Okay. It also needs to be connected to the electric choke and then to the distributor. So I'm going to cut these about here, and I'm going to put them together in this connector because this is hot with the ignition on. Right now nothing's hot because the ignition's off, but we'll get these connected. We're going to cut them first. And get rid of those. Strip the wires. Take these two wires and just wrap them together. this is going to be hot if the ignition's on, so we're going to use the better insulated connector. Slip it over those two wires and crimp it down as hard as I can. So these are two of the three wires that were connected. This is the one that comes from the starter solenoid, and I just taped it up, and I'm going to bundle it into that set of wires just so that it's there if I would ever go back, which is highly unlikely, to a points ignition, then I would need that wire. So I've taken a pigtail that I'm going to use for the distributor side, and I'm just going to insert that into this connector. And once I drop the distributor in, I'll be able to just plug these together and we'll have power to the distributor. Okay, we're set to drop the distributor in. Well, almost. Okay, the new distributor cap has to be taken off so we can see where the rotor is pointing, and it has 4 of the same types of connectors, and I may have to put this down to take them off because kind of hard to hold it with one hand and turn with the other and keep it in the frame. Well, 3 of them are off. Now I got to make sure I don't drop this cap whenever I get the 4th one off. Okay. A little bit different looking rotor in here, but it's same concept. This center thing is to make contact with the electrode in the distributor cap that comes from the coil, and this makes contact with the spark plug terminals inside the distributor as it rotates. So we have to make sure we orient this properly, and we've got to have the vacuum advance on this side and the distributor, not the distributor, the tack take off on that side so we can connect it. And we need to point the rotor towards the front of the car so that when we drop it and it spins, it's pointing towards number 1. You know, we may have a problem in that right in there looks like it might be wider than the original right in there. So I'm gonna have to go look at that. Okay, I did get it to drop in. It wasn't a problem with the fit of the thing. And I've got the rotor is pointing at about 7 o'clock, 7:30, if that were a clock and you were looking at it from the front of the car. So I'll know that whichever of the spark plug terminals is at about the 7 o'clock position, 7:30-ish, that's where I have to connect my number 1 spark plug wire, and then I need to go in the firing order clockwise from there. So the first thing I'm going to do, and depending on how easy it is, I may or may not show you the whole process of putting that clamp back on. Because it's kind of hard to see in there. But the important thing you have to remember here is when you put that distributor in, the flange on the bottom of it, and I'll get the old one to show you, has to rest on the exhaust manifold. So what we're talking about is that flange right there has to rest on the exhaust or the intake manifold. If it's setting up like this high, that means you don't have it seated fully. It's probably hung up on the input shaft to the oil pump, but it's got to be right down flat on it. And I already have connected the speedometer cable because you couldn't see anything anyways, but basically it's a square end to the cable goes in there, and then you have a cap that holds the cable on from there. So let's see how hard it's going to be to put this on. Clamp wasn't hard to put on. Let's see how hard the washer and nut are. Drop the washer already. Okay. It's going to take a bit of time to wind this nut down because you can only get a small swing at it at a time. But basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten it down so that it's kind of firm, but I can still rotate this because I need to be able to rotate that in order to set the timing. So I'm going to shut off the video for now while I tighten that, and I'll be back shortly. Okay, I've got that tightened down. I can still move this, but it takes a little bit of effort. After I'm done timing it, I will go ahead and tighten that down all the way. Now I can put the cap on. And it does does kind of lock in place, so you know you've got it in there right. And then you just simply put these clamps on with a quarter turn each, or half a turn I should say. Pushing down and turning at the same time. And then we're going to be ready to attach some spark plug wires and things. First thing you have to do is the wire that connects the distributor to the cap goes in. Second thing that goes in is the wire that provides power to the distributor. Goes in the back one. The front one is for tack, electronic tack. And then I'm connecting these wires that I put on just a bit ago. So, we should be all hooked up. Now, spark plug wires. Number one wire. Follow it all the way from the wire, and it should be at about the 7 o'clock position. Now there's kind of a problem because we got one at about 6:30 and one about 8. So I'm not entirely certain which one it should be on. We'll give it a try. Now I do have a problem. I need a different set of spark plug wires because those do not fit on the terminals. Terminals are made differently. See the difference in the caps? These, the terminals go inside. That one, terminal sticks up from the cap. So, I need different wires. So I'm back from Summit Racing with a new set of plug wires. I haven't opened them yet, but I'm sure they'll fit. What I'm doing now is, since I have to take all the plug wires off, I'm re-gapping the spark plugs because the gap with the points ignition is 0.35 and the gap with the HEI ignition is 0.45. So whenever you gap them, it should be kind of a tight fit. You can get the gauge in there, but it's kind of a tight fit. You don't want it to be sloppy loose, which is what I just made it. So I'll bend it down a little bit and try again. Haven't done this in a while, and I guess I'm out of practice. There. It should be like a slight click as it goes in. Okay, that one's gapped. I'm pulling out the ones I can reach from the bottom of the car. I've got it up on the left because there's a couple of them that it's easier to get to from the bottom. And the rest I'll do from the top, what I can't reach easily from the bottom. So once I'm done with that, I'll commence to putting on the spark plug wires. Okay, number 5 and number 7 were easy to get from underneath. Now we're going to try to do the rest of them from up top. I think what I'm going to do is shut off the camera after I do one of these, because it's likely to take longer than anybody would want to watch. While I was under there, I took the first plug off, a bolt dropped down. It turned out that it was one of my header bolts, so I'm going to have to check those all before I button it back up. So sometimes you have to resort to unconventional methods. You notice this spark plug socket has a hex end on it. I had to use that and a 3/4 inch wrench to turn it because the socket, a ratchet wouldn't fit. It was too long. So this fit in there nicely and I was able to get it out, and I'm sure I'll be able to get it back in that way too. One thing about when you're working with spark plugs, you got to be patient. If you're in a hurry and you don't get the socket on right and it slips off, that porcelain will break in an instant. The other thing is when you're putting them back in, it's good to get many turns on the spark plug before you ever put a wrench on it, because the last thing you want to do is cross thread it and screw up the threads in your head. Now in these cars, you need a variety of different tools to get at them. I used a long extension on number 3. I used the 3/4 inch wrench on number 1 there. Now I'm working on number 4. Not doing these in any particular order, but the long extension's too long, so I needed a short 3-inch extension. And as I said, just patience. Patience is very good when you're working on cars. Sometimes they will try your patience, but fortunately I enjoy working on them, and because of that I don't get frustrated easily. I just deal with whatever comes up. Okay, plug number 2, which is the front one on this side, is another one of those cases where I'm using the 3/4 inch wrench on the end of the socket to reach it, because the socket, or the ratchet rather, will not fit in there. know that some of you are watching this and it's stuff that you already know, but I try to mention things that somebody who's brand new to working on cars might not know. So if I'm telling you stuff you already know, good for you. Glad you know it. One point I wanted to make that I thought of while I was putting in number 2. I had the little extension on the ratchet, and as I was tightening it, I support this part of the ratchet right here so that it doesn't slip and break the ratchet. It's a much safer way to put the spark plugs in. Another thing I just thought of is worth mentioning when you're taking spark plug wires off. It's always a good idea to twist the boot because they will be stuck on there. Almost always. So twisting them breaks that bond from the heat, and then it allows you to pull them off. Goes pretty fast if you're patient and don't get frustrated with it being hard to reach some of the things. You just get creative with your tool set and use whatever works. So when I went to get the new spark plug wires, I looked at Summit Racing, which is only about a half hour from here, and I looked at AutoZone, which is 20 minutes. So I saw these on Summit Racing, and it says on it Performance Distributors, but there was another name, and I don't have the paperwork with me. It's in the house. But these are clearly marked for cylinder number 1. It tells you, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but it tells you distributor / coil. That's where it hooks up to, so obviously the other end is the spark plug end. They gave me even a little tube of dielectric grease with them, but I have my own can. It's a little bit easier to use, so I'll be squirting a little bit of that in. The other thing that I have, and I don't know if I even need it now, but I think I'm going to use them, is I got these socks, if you will, for the spark plug wires to keep them from burning. Not sure I need it because this looks to be the same material here, and I'm not quite sure if I can even get them off. But I'm going to try, see what I can do here. I know that I put them on as I was building. These were cut to length spark plug wires, so I put them on as I was building the wires before they had the boots on either end. So I don't know that I can actually use them on this. It's going to be a shame if I can't, because they were relatively expensive purchase. Well, I can't get them off, so I do happen to have a 76 Corvette, which would take the same set of spark plug wires as this would, and I am planning on doing a complete rebuild on it. So I will just keep these and put them on the 76, because these are fairly expensive set of wires, and the boots are a nice feature on them. So like I was talking about before, I believe that this is number 1 right here. I believe I'll be able to time it appropriately, because this will turn far enough. You know what? I'm going to take that air cleaner back off. It's just going to be easier to work without it in the way. That's going to be much easier. So, using that as number 1. These cables are very thick. They won't fit in the they won't fit in the wirings that I have. Going on from there, we're going to the second one, which on my list is number 8. Easy as that. Except this number 1 doesn't want to stay on. I might have to crimp that connector inside there. Okay, I'm going to go along the firing order and do 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, and 2, and then we'll be done. I'm going to shut the camera off while I do that. So, I got to where I was supposed to put the number 6 wire on, and the 6 wire would not reach any way, shape, or form. So what I'm doing now is I'm hoping that I can rotate this distributor far enough to get it to fire on number 1 and get it in time. So I'm going to shift all these plug wires one slot over. And hopefully number 6 will now be able to fit. Not sure how they expect you to get this on here. These 2 wires have to cross. Number 3 and number 6. If I squeeze that number 3 terminal down a little bit so it stays on better, I think it will work. too much. Root to get in there. Hope it'll fire with these in these positions because there was no way to reach it from the other side. Well, at least they appear to be staying on. Okay. We're going to proceed now to 5, 7, and then 2. Well, there it is. They're all on. Question now is, will it start? Am I close enough to being able to time it? So I kind of ran out of time yesterday, so I kind of closed it up and had to leave. Went and I did some research, and I found out that the reason that I'm having such a hard time getting the wires to fit is because this distributor cap is designed so that you have number 1 cylinder over here as compared to the points distributor, which it was over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all these off. I'm going to take the distributor cap off, and I'm going to bring it back up, the engine back up to number 1 on the compression stroke. In other words, the rotor's going to point to about here. And once I get that done, I'll pull the distributor and I'll aim the rotor over here to number 1. And then when I put the wires back on, I'll start the firing order with number 1, 8, so on and so forth. So that's what we're going to do today, and we should have better luck because then once the wires are on correctly, I should be able to reinsert the distributor in the manner that I'll be able to rotate it enough to get it to fire correctly. Should say at the right time. Then I'll be able to time it. we'll go from there. So, the cap is being held on by the wiring that goes to the actual distributor. So I have to take that off. So, that was easy enough to get off. Now, what I'll do is I'll tap the starter until I get the rotor point approximate where it was, and I'll check the timing marks on the harmonic balancer and make sure that we're top dead center. And I'll pull the distributor, put it back in with the rotor pointing over here, and put the wires back on. We should be good to go. That ought to be near top dead center, but I'll check the timing marks here. Quite see them. I'm going to tap just a little bit more. Hopefully I won't have to go around again. That's probably too far. Having trouble seeing in there. Need a better flashlight. Okay, I'm going to take it around once more. I probably was pretty good at the first time, but I couldn't see with the flashlight I had, so can't see them, but that thing's a little rusty and it's hard to read them. I'm going to put this up in the air and try to make a better mark so that I can read it. Okay, I'm a bit confused. I will admit that yesterday I wasn't quite sure about whether I was seeing the timing marks correctly, but when I pulled the distributor, the rotor was pointing in this direction at what I thought was top dead center on number 1. But according to the timing marks, right now I'm at top dead center and that rotor is pointing in an entirely different direction. So I am going to pull it. I'm going to put it back in with the wires in the way that they were designed to be, and I am going to point the rotor towards the second terminal on the distributor cap, and we will see what happens. Okay, I placed the distributor cap back on there temporarily, and it looks like the terminal I want to put the number 1 wire on should be at about 5 o'clock to 5:30 if you're looking at a clock from the front of the car. So that's where I'm going to try to set the rotor when I put the distributor in. I'm going to now loosen the distributor and take it out, and I'll show you the next step that's required in order to do that. Okay, the clamp is off. I am going to pull the distributor just like I did yesterday. The rotor will turn slightly as I pull it out. Okay. Now I'm gonna want to insert that pointing about that direction. Didn't know whether I was in range of the camera over there, but you recall yesterday there's that pin, or this little thing inside here that mates with the driving shaft for the oil pump. So when I put this in again, I'm going to zoom out. I put it in again. That slot in the fuel pump has to line up with the metal thing here that is going to be pointing roughly there. So in order to do that, if I'm looking at the front of the car, it almost has to be in line with the center line of the car. And right now it's not, because of where it was when I pulled it out. So I'm going to take a screwdriver, insert it down in there into that fuel pump shaft, and just give it a little spin to get it to line up with the tab on the base of the distributor. Otherwise, it will never go in. So, could use a longer screwdriver, but I don't know if I have one. I could also use a wider blade. Okay, I have, I think, a longer screwdriver that's going to allow me to get down in there and turn that. Finally got it. That should be pretty close. With the rotor pointed a little bit counterclockwise from where I want it to end up, drop the shaft in, rotate it, and we might be a tooth off. Okay, I have to check that shaft based on this position of the rotor. It's got to be turned some more. this again. This is a situation where you just have to play with it until you get it in there. Still hanging up on that oil pump shaft. I'm going to turn off the camera and play with it until I get it to drop in. Okay, I finally figured out what the issue was with inserting that. Is when I was looking at the angle of that, the thing on the distributor upside down, and then trying to find it was upside down. So when I looked down in there, I was putting it in this way, and it was actually 180 degrees opposite because of it being right side up now. So that's what the difficulty was. Put the distributor back in, put the cap back on, put the wires in the correct order hopefully, and hopefully it will fire up. Okay, there's the hold on bolt. It's on there tight enough to hold it in place, but it's not locked down. I can turn it to time it. This time I'm not going to put the I'm not going to put the distributor or tachometer cable on until after I'm sure it fires up. Because if I have to take it out and readjust it, then it's just a waste of time. Okay, that's on. Put the wire that goes between the distributor and the cap. Put the power wire to the actual distributor. And need my firing order. And these are all labeled on the top, so I can tell which wires they are. So, number 1. Number 8. Number 4. Number 3. That one's gonna have to go down around somehow to get over there. I figured the best way to route it. Number 3. After 3 is number 6. Guess what? Now we got plenty of length on the cable to reach. Number 5. Number 7. And number 2. That's pretty amazing. They actually all fit and went on pretty easy. I'm actually beginning to wonder if these timing marks on this harmonic balancer don't actually match this engine. Because I tried to fire it up and all I got was backfiring at the tailpipe. So I am actually going to take off the valve cover and watch the valve. Fortunately, somebody put wing nut valve cover nuts on this at some point in the past. So it makes it fairly easy to take off a valve cover. Uh-oh. Biggest problem is, I think I had a problem with the alternator. It's got to be loosened in order to clear for the valve cover to clear. Maybe maybe it was the other way around. Maybe I had to put the valve cover, take the valve cover off to get the alternator started. I know there was some kind of an issue with that. Okay, it was the alternator that needed to be put on before the valve cover. I'm going to set this up where I can see the valves on the video, because that's kind of an important thing. We'll see if we can zoom in. I'm zooming in on the valves for number 1 cylinder. I guess I can't see them from here. Okay, they are the number 1 and 2 valves there. I'm going to try to crank it and watch them, and when they're both closed at the same time, okay, it appears number 1. Intake is closed, exhaust is open. So that would mean that we're doing the exhaust stroke. Exhaust is closed, intake is open. Still more. Okay. Both are closing now. This is going to be top dead center compression stroke. They're both loose. That means that they are completely open, or I'm sorry, closed. They're completely closed. That would be the compression stroke. And now I'm going to look at, if I can find my flashlight, I will look at the timing marks and see where they are. So that gold thing that's, it's on the valve bolts. The rocker bolts or studs. I'm told that's a stud girdle, and I'm told that's to prevent the valves from flexing or the studs from flexing at high RPMs because it ties them all together. I don't know, I didn't build this car. I was on there when I got it, and I had no idea what this person built the car for, because it's got 308 gears in the rear. That tells me that it's not for acceleration from a dead stop. That's more for something where you could use those high RPMs, which apparently this engine was built for. But when I got the car, it had narrow front tires, which would tell me that's more like for drag racing. Oh my. That is way off of top dead center. That's more like number 6. I don't know how we got so screwed up on this, but I think we're on the right track now, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the distributor. Now that I've got I've got the valves both closed, and I can tell that because there's no pressure on the rockers. They both move. If there was pressure on them, like that one, maybe you didn't even see that. I can tell that both of these rockers are not putting any pressure on the actual valve, because I can wiggle them. This one I cannot wiggle, therefore it's putting pressure on the valve. So I think I'm going to just, well, maybe I shouldn't. I'm positive I saw that exhaust valve close, the intake valve open, that's your intake, and then they both closed as it came up. So I'm positive that's on top dead center on the power stroke. So that's when it ought to be firing. So I'm going to pull the distributor out, and I'm going to put it back in with the rotor pointed towards where number 1 is going to be on the cap, and I'm going to try it again. I will get this. Okay, I'm going to try and see if I can actually get a smooth video of Tignisat setting it to point to number 1, or where number 1 should be, and put it back in. Wish me luck. It might actually be in the right position. It's either in the right position or maybe 90 degrees reversed. That's a little bit too far. I'll try to back it up 1 tooth. A little bit of a tweak on the position of that the position of the oil pump shaft. We'll go the right way this time. Let's give that a try. That actually went in. I'm going to double check to make sure it's down far enough. It is. Well, that ought to be it. What I will do is tighten up that distributor and put the cap and the wires on. I'm not going to videotape that because I've shown that several times, I think, and then we'll turn the camera back on for the test firing. Okay, it's all back together. Having determined top dead center by looking at the valves rather than the timing marks, I'm ready to give it a try. Well, obviously it started up, but in all of the fussing with it, my battery's dead. So I'm going to have to put the charger on it for a while and then fire it up and pull it out of the garage so that it can warm up before I can time it.